Assalamu alaikum and welcome back, dear listeners. Our next segment is called Zionism is Not Judaism, and we're going to talk to some of the many Jews in this country and abroad who vow not in our name when it comes to the atrocities currently happening in Palestine. We think this is an important segment for several reasons, because so often people who are not Jewish think that Zionism is Judaism. And I'm not going to say much more about that. Rather, let me welcome into the studio our guests, both of them from South African Jews for a Free Palestine, both of them activists, Rina King and Noah Lubinsky. I'm not going to read out your whole bios. I think we'd rather get into the meat of the issues. So, welcome to you both, and thank you for making time on a public holiday to be with us.
Good morning, Aisha, and thank you for having us on this day.
Good
Yeah,
morning.
good morning.
Good morning to you both, and thank you, as I said, for being with us. So often when we hear people talking about Zionism, that Zionism or enacting Zionism, that Zionism becomes conflated in ordinary people's minds with Judaism. On the converse of that, very often Israel or its supporters and defenders use the anti-Semitic trope to defend their actions, and sometimes those actions, of course, being indefensible. Would you like to comment on that as an opening, Rina?
Right, so let me contextualize it for you. As we are brought up to believe that Zionism is part of Judaism. In the Jewish day schools, actually, they teach very little Judaism. They primarily teach Zionism. We're brought up to believe that in South Africa and in most Jewish places in the world, they're brought up to believe that Jews are the victims. So after the Holocaust, these poor Jews, which they were desperate, came to Palestine and had to form a state in order to prevent another Holocaust. And what was the reaction of the Palestinians or the Arab people there? They wanted to chase the Jews into the sea, and they hated Jews, and they were anti-Semitic, and they wanted to eliminate the Jews. And hence, that is why Palestinians are fighting against the Jews, because they're anti-Semitic. And most of us were brought up and believed this as children and young adults. And then we got to find out that actually the truth was that Jews came to Palestine, and at the climax in 1948, drove Palestinians off their land, off their villages at the barrel of a gun. They made examples of villages like Deir Yassin. 750,000 people had to flee their homes at the barrel of a gun. And the oppression has just continued ever since. It's occupation, it is military occupation on the West Bank, it is occupation and concentration camps in Gaza, and it's apartheid in Israel. And although the UN has said that Palestinians should have the right of return from all the other Palestinian refugee camps throughout the world, Israel has denied the right of return and is in conflict with UN resolutions for 75 years.
Mm-hmm.
So Israel is not the victim, and it's not Judaism that is. In fact, Israel has diminished Judaism rather than enhanced it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I believe it's a good point to bring Noah in, because he was one of the hosts of the screening of this very hard hitting movie, Israelism, over the weekend. Noah, over to you.
yeah, and I think it's important. Anyone who has time to watch Israelism, it's quite fantastic. And one of the points it makes is that, in calling Zionism, Judaism, and anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, what we're also doing is we're really cutting off any kind of discourse around what actually is anti-Semitic, because now anything we do that is criticizing the state of Israel is apparently a criticism of Jews as a whole. And in fact, that in and of itself is quite an anti-Semitic thing to do, right? To
Mm-hmm.
conflate an entire religion with one subsect and like one political ideology, and in particular, right now, a political ideology and a state that is committing genocide. It's very, very dangerous to then conflate all Jews with one state that is committing genocide. And I think what we have when we have this idea that Zionism is equal to Judaism is that we no longer, first of all, see actual anti Semitism because it's all conflated. But number two, it leaves no room for other kinds of Judaism, right? So we have Mizrahi Jews that have actually lived in the Middle East for a lot longer. We have Ethiopian Jews. We have Lembe Jews that are more a part of Southern Africa, and all of these kinds of different Judaisms that aren't a part of what we see in the kind of Ashkenazi white coded Judaism that has now taken over the state of Israel are silenced, and in that silencing, we also get a massive kind of shrinking of what Judaism can be, because now we only have one kind of dominant form of Judaism, and in that we lose a lot of the other forms of Judaism there could be. We lose the sense of what in Yiddish is called doikite, this idea of here-ness, this idea that we make home where we are and we make communities where we are. Rather, instead of making these vibrant Jewish communities all over the world, Israel has taken over the dominant culture and taken over the ability of Jews to make these vibrant communities all around the world. And I think that's part of why we see such a growing um, contingency of non or anti-Zionist Jews, because we have this one dominant culture in Israel saying that this is what Judaism is, and right now saying that Judaism is committing genocide. And so we're seeing a growing contingency saying, no, not in our name. This isn't our Judaism. This isn't what we believe in. We do not believe in the dehumanization, the settler colonialism of the Palestinian people, and we will stand up against that. And I think one of the important ways we stand up against that is through BDS.
Thank you so much for that, Noah. You've touched on several pertinent points there. I want to bring up two things and then get you each to respond to them. Firstly, the mainstream media and the mainstream Western media has largely colluded over the past 7 decades or more with the narrative that Palestinians basically are infringing on Israel's rights rather than the other way around, or on Israelis' rights rather than the other way around. I'd like you to comment on that and the effect that's having this genocide unfold in real time on our screens from social media has had on people within the Jewish community coming to realize what's been going on. And secondly, how do you conflate the fact that so many Jews worked so hard against our own apartheid here in South Africa and were lauded for that, as did many Muslims, of course, right? But now, when it comes to Palestine, you have two distinct streams, even amongst those former anti-apartheid activists. So on the one hand, you have the exemplar of Ronnie Kasrils, who has been very, very vocal on Palestinian rights. On the other hand, you have Howard Sackstein, now on the SAJBD, I think, and former IEC director or chair, being very, very much against the decision of South Africa, for example, taking Israel to the ICJ. How does that history of anti-apartheid activism translate into two such different responses when it comes to Palestine and Israel? Over to you, Rina, if you'd like to answer one or both of those.
So let me start with the latter one. Basically, I think that the people that were really committed to the struggle of South Africa are still in Palestinian support. Howard Sackstein maybe was a bit of a liberal, and yes, he got a job in the IEC, but he really he's now saying, that actually maybe the DA, Steenhuisen, should take over power. So really, are they really anti-apartheid? So they have never really made the leap of actually understanding the plight of oppressed people in the world. And, it's through reading and it's through understanding. People like Avi Shlaim, Ilan Pape, people that actually present a different point of view, which the Israeli regime has managed to actually conquer the press by being white supremacists, by aligning with the likes of Murdoch and people that dominate the press, that actually advocate a white supremacy. And Israel fits into the white supremacist realm and is really the 51st state of America. And if you go to Israel, it is like that. And so people are more comfortable with it, whereas people are not comfortable with somebody, with having friends with the country, with people with brown skins. So it's basically through education that the media prevents us happening. I mean, we can see the media, how they are trying to manipulate the elections in South Africa here too. That and downplaying the ICJ. And it's through that white supremacy that and American imperialism that actually maintains the narrative that Howard Stackstein desperately wants to believe, that they cannot see that there can be a democracy. And we are brought up with this total fear of Palestinians, that they want to drive us into the sea. And you speak to Palestinians and all they want is a democracy from the river to the sea. And, the only way that we're going to get this is actually to subjugate Israel through the BDS movement, because Israel doesn't have Palestinians working there like we had in South Africa. And the international community has a huge task on their hands to isolate Israel. We have to boycott every Israeli product. We have to boycott products like Hewlett-Packard. We have to boycott because they are so complicit in the genocide and in the occupation. In Israel, you carry your ID document, says what religion you are. They are part of that and part of the checkpoints to say that if you are not Jewish, you have lesser rights in Israel.
You can't use certain roads, you can't access water supplies, certain education.
That's in the West Bank, yeah.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But even within Israel, you have lesser land rights. 93% of Israel is controlled by the Israel Land Authority, and they actually specify whether you have to be Jewish to be able to buy certain land. They specify whether you're allowed to build on land. And the only way we're going to put pressure on Israel is to start boycotting products. A lot of machinery and a lot of fertilizers are imported into South Africa from Israel. We have to stop that. There are alternatives, and a lot of medicines, there are alternatives. And we have to start divesting. Anything you are invested in, just make sure that there is no Israeli companies in that investment, and pressure the investment houses to stop investing in those companies, stop investing in Albert, the Israeli banks, and all kinds of Israeli companies, because that is the way we are going to pressure a change within Israel. And also defunding America. Let America also suffer, because they are funding the genocide. Let them also reduce their profits. Indonesia has very effectively ousted McDonald's. we have to participate in this.
We have to. We have the buying power. We have the alternatives, as you mentioned. So thank you, Rina, for that very succinct analysis, which segues very well into what we, or would aligns very well with what we did yesterday. We spoke about BDS with some of the people responsible for both the national and the international campaigns. We spoke about academic and cultural boycotts, and we touched on this issue of land rights and within Israel not being able to buy property unless, or very little property available for being bought unless you are Jewish. So thank you very much from that. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. As always, I wish we could have this conversation continue. Noah, can we come to you for a few last words, please?
Sure. Just to go on to this idea of, what does it mean to see the genocide now? I think it's important for us to remember that we're seeing a heightening of it right now, but what we're seeing is a 75-year genocide starting with the Nakba. But I do hope that with the current social media awareness, it's bringing more people in, and it's allowing more and more people to see the humanity of Palestinian people, allowing more and more Jews to see the humanity of Palestinian people, because there's nowhere really to hide anymore. There's nowhere, to hide behind these lines that we were taught and indoctrinated into as children. And so what really is happening now, as we see the atrocities on a day-by-day basis, is that we're all being forced to look at our own humanity, and we're all being forced to look at the humanity of Palestinians and saying, not in our name, free Palestine, free Congo, free Sudan. Yeah, and we really, the number of protests, the number of moments of solidarity that we're seeing, it is atrocious that it's happening to happen in this dire moment. But it is still quite incredible to see just every day people coming out again and again for the Palestinian people. And hopefully this
Totally.
continues until a free Palestine, or at the very least until a permanent ceasefire.
Until a permanent ceasefire at the very least. Lovely way to end off this segment. Thank you both for being with us. And dear listeners and viewers, remember what Noah just said. Every one of your actions counts, because every time you share something or spread something, hopefully more people begin to see the humanity of Palestinians, which for so many decades was deliberately and systematically dehumanized. So thank you both, Rina King and Noah Lubinsky, for edifying us so much in this short segment, but I think a very intensive one. We really are appreciative of your efforts on behalf of the Palestinians and on behalf of oppressed peoples everywhere, including, as Noah said, in Congo and Sudan. It remains to me to wish you both a very, very good remainder of Human Rights Day. I hope you have a fruitful day. And with that, we need to go back to an ad break to pay the bills from our generous sponsors.